pictures and stuff. My ugly face anyway. All right, thanks, Sean.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, did we get that sent to Rob?
Yeah, is that okay?
Hi, Glenn. Just nod if you can hear me. Okay, well, I'll get going. Thanks for coming. This Africa adventure just sort of creeped up on me. As part of, I'm a 22 Nuffield Scholar. That's a scholarship that originated in England about 70 years ago. It branched out to sort of the Commonwealth countries, and now there's, I think, 15 official countries that take part in Nuffield. And the whole goal is to sort of step outside of your comfort zone and to choose a study topic and tour the world, looking at agricultural practices in various forms. So it's a really cool kind of family that you join. It's like a bunch of crazy ag enthusiasts around the world. They're usually, there's farmers, there's scientists, there's people in every different sort of walk of life. But you take 2 years and you study and you travel somewhere around 10 weeks. And one of the trips is supposed to be a big long one, like 6-7 weeks. Of course, I joined right in the middle of COVID, which threw a lot of wrenches in global travel. The year that I started, there was 2 groups, 2 years put together. So my first trip was to Scotland and then England for what they call the Contemporary Scholars Conference. So 143 scholars from around the world got together there for a week. And it's sort of our introduction to the program. They toured us around different places in the UK, in England. And some of those people that we would have met here would have been on this trip. So from that, Zimbabwe was actually a partnering country for quite a few years. But when the Mugabe government came in place, they actually took the farms away from everybody. So that was a big problem. So the whole Nuffield program shut down in Zimbabwe until last year, where a 2004 scholar named Rob Blake decided that it was time to renew ties because things have been rolling again. Some farmers are getting back engaged in building businesses in Zimbabwe. So there were actually 3 scholars from Zimbabwe at this conference in England. And the first one I met was actually from Zimbabwe, and he was a crocodile farmer. So I'm like, okay, that's different from what I'm used to. And I was certainly intrigued. My plans were actually to go to Brazil or Argentina. And then all of a sudden this organized trip to Zimbabwe popped up. And I said, looks like I'm going to Africa, because within the Nuffield, they also have what's called a global focus program. And usually it's Australia that organizes this. They have a really big program in Australia, like 20 or 30 scholars every year in Australia. Canada, we usually have like 3. We have a much smaller program. There's 6 in my year because we combined 2 years. So there was a group from, actually it's got stemmed from some people in the UK that wanted to go see Alan Savory. He's like a famous guy in grazing in Africa. So that was sort of the initial conversation. And then they decided to plan a big trip and open it up to a few of us. So there was 4 Canadians that went, 1 Irishman, about 5 or 6 from the UK, and probably around 5 or 6 from Australia, and then the 3 Zimbabweans that were there. So we embarked in a journey. The first thing we did was fly to Victoria Falls, and then went to this Alan Savory Institute. So now we're up to the pictures. The fellow there at A10, he's barefoot and he's out. I didn't realize, and I felt bad that I'd never heard of the guy, but he's world renowned. He's got a TEDx video, and he sort of changed the approach to managing the wild grazing in Africa, and it has expanded it globally. So if you think regenerative ag, this is part of it. They're really into really managed grazing. They're not into science as much as common sense, they say. So it's got quite a following. These guys bring in groups for training on grazing. So right now he's just talking about that this is a special tree that used to drop these pods, and now you can see it's grazed out. And the reason it's grazed out is because there's no actual people, native people out there anymore, because they used to hang out under these trees and scare the elephants away. Right now, they're there and the elephants are eating it all. And now there's no more of these trees growing because the seeds aren't getting spread. So they kind of get into the whole really kind of ecosystem thing. So now these guys are both making money on, you know, teaching the grazing techniques, but now they're going to put tourism in. A lot of tourism mixed in with everything in Africa for agriculture. But now they want to put up like tents and then have people out, you know, in these areas to actually protect that area where, so the elephants going over graze them. So his claim to fame here is that by his grazing strategies, now he's recuperating. They don't have to do this deforestation and burning of everything. And now these areas are getting wetter. So obviously we're down on a more of a low spot where you've got standing water, but it's sort of this culture of grazing. And now we're in some taller grass. So they like to let things get really tall and then come in and mob graze it essentially and push everything over so that new growth can come up. They have herds of cattle that they walk out every day. So that was one thing that was really shocking about Zimbabwe was they have tremendous access to labor there. So, you know, there's a guy out here, maybe I'll turn my pointer on so Glenn can see. Man, I don't know how to. You can't see this pointer, can you, Glenn?
No,
Okay.
but I'm good. I can see the pictures, so.
Okay. I can annotate.
Spotlight?
Now can you see it? Okay.
I can.
Okay,
Oh, perfect.
we'll carry on.
Yeah,
then.
quite-
They have like 3 or 4 people that follow these cattle. And they pay them like $1 a day. So what I found really interesting was almost every farm we went to, there was about 400 employees. So they have really, you know, access to really cheap labor. And so they would walk these cows out every single day, sometimes 10 miles in a day, do their grazing, then bring them back. And then they had herds of dogs to help protect them from the lions. So this was their technique of doing things. While we stayed there, you know, we're in malaria country, so these mosquito nets became pretty common, and then always having a fan on. So having the fan helped destabilize the mosquitoes so they wouldn't bite you. And then of course we're all on malaria medicine so we don't get sick. And after we did, you know, sort of the grazing training, they wanted to compare it to the national forest. So we're in the national forest here, and they wanted to really show that their grazing techniques were better than the best the government had to offer. So in the meantime, we got to see some African animals, which was pretty exciting. This is the Zambezi River, which is a really important one in Zimbabwe. Lots of crocodiles. So these guys standing close to the edge was actually not advisable everywhere we were. And I think there was probably 3 or 4 people that died from crocodiles a month that were there. So that was, you know, different, being quite cautious wherever we went around the river. But at the same time, the Zambezi River is what everybody loves about this country. So, you know, the one fellow that I met there, you know, he says he loves Zimbabwe because of this river and he doesn't want to leave because of it. So it's kind of instilled in their culture there. Lots of interesting wild or plants, and this was called a sausage tree, believe it or not, and grows these big long sausage fruits that I think sometimes people would ferment them into some weird drink, but just caught my eye anyways. And this looks like we're about to be stormed by an elephant, and we came across a herd of like 30 elephants. They're pretty amazing when you see them up close. I got some more shots, but this guy here, his nickname is Wolves, but he's one of the Zimbabwean people, and he was nervous right now. So when the natives are nervous, then I pay attention. But we got through without any damage to the vehicle. We just have a little baby sneaking through there, but certainly, you know, the animals and the landscape is incredibly captivating. The first time I was there, the sunsets are amazing. And I think it's a lot because it's incredibly dusty and a lot of particulate matter in the air from burning. There's so much burning that goes on there for a number of reasons. Some for agriculture, some to chase out animals, some so they can find animals and eat them. But I did struggle myself personally with sinuses while I was there. But the good thing was the sunsets were amazing. After going to the wildlife park, we stopped at a restaurant in sort of the middle of mainstream Vic Falls and got a traditional meal. And there was a group of kids here that sang for us as entertainment. But I'll have to say the people there were all incredibly friendly, always smiling, always happy. Even in the grungier parts of town, it was very safe. So, I'd always been afraid of Africa growing up. I had no little bit about it. But while I was there, I always felt safe. It felt like a bit of a time travel going back in time in a lot of regards. But it was still really interesting to learn all about their culture. This was sort of an array of their foods that they tend to eat naturally, lots of nuts and seeds, and they gave us some juices that they make, and it was just a traditional meal that they served for us, which was a lot of fun. It looks beautiful. This was their appetizers, but if you're not looking closely, sometimes you'll find some unusual things. See a little eyeball in my food there. So just a little fish that they deep fry, and it was okay. Didn't taste bad. This one was a little bit more trying for me. It's a type of larvae or worm there. So me and my fellow Canadian Amy started chewing on this, and the texture was less than desirable. So we had a hard time stomaching that one. But I did try it again. That was prepared differently, and it was a little bit better. But that's kind of a common snack food there, high protein. So we took a tour of Victoria Falls, one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, and you can see why. It's just an amazing waterfall. We were lucky to see it near the end of the hot season here, so it was dry. And when it gets into the wet season, it's actually too powerful that all you see is mist, so you don't get to see it as much. So we got a really good view. This is Voss. He's actually from Zimbabwe. Back in a lot of these guys are like 5th or 6th generation in Zimbabwe. So, originally a UK settlement. It was Rhodesia up until 1980 when the revolution was there. And there was a pretty mass exodus from Europeans, but a lot of them stayed. A lot of the farmers, they had been farming their whole life. Like, I'm only a 4th generation Canadian, so I can understand they believe it's their country, just as it is the Aboriginals there. So it was interesting to see those that stayed. It's a very small percentage, but they very much love their country. And he grew up on a farm. Mugabe was actually doing well at first for the country, and things changed around 2000, and they launched something called the land reform. And what they did was they actually just took the farms away from all of the European farmers, and they just they used pretty shrewd tactics. There was murders, killing women and children, and turning the workers against them. So remember I said a lot of farms would have 300-400 employees. They would go in and turn these employees against them, and then take the farms over. So he grew up on a farm that was taken away from them, and now was working for a new farm and supplies like 70% of the pigs for the country. So within 3 or 4 years, a lot of businesses have been taken up. So when they took the land away, they divvied it up into 6.5 hectare portions and then gave them to certain people to farm on their own. So they call them small landholders. But in 20 years that had passed, a lot of the ag land didn't get used. So some people have gone back, they made deals, and they said, look, this isn't getting used, we should farm it. So in 3 or 4 years, there's been quite a few businesses that have developed, but pretty amazing to see that they have their farms taken away. They don't own it now. They can't own land. They can't get any bank loans. During a lot of that transition is where that hyperinflation came in, and that's why we've got the $20 trillion bills, because the government just kept printing money, and even within a day, you couldn't plan. They couldn't figure out whether their businesses were profitable or not. So they ended up using the American dollar, and they still continue to use that. So there's two currencies, and it's pretty dramatic. Sometimes even the exchange rates, there's a government exchange rate, and then there's a regular exchange rate. So people have gotten pretty astute to knowing the cost of things because it changes on a daily basis. But anyways, very passionate farmers. Pretty beautiful falls. It was pretty hot here too. Half of it was dry, and then we get into the spot where it became a tropical rainforest, and this is just mist from the river, even though we're in a dry area. So it's pretty gorgeous. So I got some framables here, I think. Okay.
Oh,
You sure do.
Where was it? One of these, there's actually a pool across where people are swimming. I think they're absolutely insane. I'll have to go back on this. Yeah, so in this picture,
yeah.
you see there's people up here. That's called Devil's Pool. They're swimming right above this freaking waterfall. So yeah, they're nuts. I didn't do that. There's some bungee jumps and some giant swings there too. But obviously a very touristy spot, Vic Falls, because of the falls here.
Are there jungle animals there?
Like that one?
This one?
No, like monkeys.
There's monkeys, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There's baboons that run through the streets. There's elephants, there's monkeys, there's lots of animals in Vic Falls. In fact, the baboons, that Vos guy said they're assholes. They'll just cause trouble, and they target the women for some reason. So they'll wait for the women to go grocery shopping and then
They
attack
steal
them and
things.
steal their
Yeah, they
groceries.
steal things.
Yeah. So we were warned, be careful walking in the streets of Vic Falls for that reason, and for elephants. They're wild animals and they're gigantic. But this is just a warthog. I've always loved warthogs. They're just hilarious. Yeah. So that evening, we went on a sunset cruise on the Zambezi. So there's all these river boats, and the wildlife along the Zambezi is amazing. So, we saw crocodiles along the bank, and then they would drive up and show you things. Like we saw elephants coming in. So yeah, at this point, we've only been there for a few days, but we definitely got the African bug. And then we get to see the sunset.
On your cruise.
And they have a beer called Zambezi as well. So Vos was joking in his deep voice with his accent. He goes, Zambezi, a beer so good they named a river after it. We drank a few of them. So we're leaving the Allen Savory Institute, and yeah, we were short a vehicle, and this is how we drove to the airport. So life is different. I mentioned 1980. Like, I don't think the roads have been improved since 1980. So a lot of things we take for granted. I was pretty happy to get back to Alberta and be on smooth roads. So we take, a lot of things for granted. Our first world problems are pretty insignificant compared to what they have to deal with on an everyday basis, and yet they still love it there. So yeah, I think it's a good experience to go to a third world country, and part of me always avoided it just because ignorance is bliss, but I was there. This is just one of the fellas. So the camaraderie was amazing, and just there's just something about the place and our group. Like we made instant connections with everybody, fell in love, and for me, I'm somewhat of an empath, so I really caught on to the history and the feelings there, and I felt like the whole experience was incredibly emotional. So it was really interesting that way. So we flew to Harare, which is the capital. And like everywhere, you actually get off the plane, like just with stairs. And so we haven't done that for a while. And it's kind of a crappy looking airport, but it's the capital. We went off to a logistics export company just near the airport. So there's not a lot of agricultural exports, but what they do have is really, really high value. So this is just a bundle of roses. So they grow flowers, they put them on the planes, and they ship them to Holland. And then Holland has such a massive distribution center for flowers. So there's a lot of that. The other main commodity here is blueberries. So those are all boxes of blueberries. We did visit a blueberry farm, and that goes by ship up again to Holland. for distribution. So they can be incredibly profitable ag businesses because they tend to own the entire value chain, right from growing it to distribution and sale. And that seems to be the theme all around. If you can get an investor and create a value chain link, then they're quite profitable. But for the most part, the export business was pretty small. I mentioned the crocodile farm. That's all for high-end purses and things like that mostly go to France. So they would likely go through the same distribution center up into Europe. This is Boris and his kid, and interesting to see, like, his children all go to boarding schools, and they're quite polite, happy, well-adjusted boys, and again, love their country and love what they're doing. So despite the chaos that they live in, they're all happy families. The driving there, he didn't want to lend me his vehicle because driving is crazy. So this is just a tiny example of it, but they don't have lanes. They just take whatever they want and go wherever they want. And it was pure madness. And then at the same time, there are people hanging off the sides of vehicles and so on. So now we stopped by Boris's business. He's the farm manager for Triple C Pork, and they, like I said, they grow the pigs. They have their own feed mill. They have their own retails, and they have, I think, 5 farms. So this one farm produces 70% of the pork for the entire country. And then while we were in this store, which I didn't get the picture of this one, but those pork chops are $27,000. So while we don't have $20 trillion bills, it's still a much different sticker shock when you look at things. But while we were standing here, the power went out. And we're like, oh, well, that's not a good thing for a freezer type environment. And throughout the entire trip, the power went out constantly. So everywhere has, like this, would have a generator. And, we worry about not having Wi-Fi. Well, here they worry about having no power half the time. And 40% of their business was actually selling whole hogs. So other people would come in and buy a hog and maybe butcher it and sell it themselves, kind of thing. So interesting to see pigs rolling out like that at the grocery store. This is the fellow that is the manager of it, and he was like up front with us. He's like, yep, we play in the informal market, which is the black market. So it's different to see people talk about how they do business, and the majority of what they had to do was, they had a book about 1.5 inches thick was the month finances. So being able to switch back and forth currency wise, they always have to translate things back to American. And when they can sell into the informal market, then the government isn't able to tax them. So the government will take money however they do and then do nothing with it. So like I said, the roads haven't been touched in 40 years. The government will bring in money, pay for a road in quotation marks, and then not do it. So a lot of government corruption, a lot of the game is playing, I suppose it happens in our governments too, is to try to hide from taxes as much as you can, but this is in a much more aggressive way. And just, you could see the stress on this guy's face when he was explaining how he does business. And we just outright asked him, I was like, well, how do you guys do business in this environment? And he said it does come down to the people. You have to have the right people in place that know the connections and know the game. Most of us in our environment would never even dream of doing business, but for some reason these guys are still out there trying to make things happen, and when they do it in a big way. So it was really interesting. It was kind of humbling in that regard. Hey Glenn, if you do have questions, by all means just pipe up whenever you want. So after going to the actual sort of corporate office, we went out to the farm, and they take biosecurity pretty seriously. So that's a dip where you drive the vehicle through. Can't tell you how many times we had to get out and dip our feet and wash our hands in all the different areas. But then I guess that's one thing that we don't have to worry about as much in Canada, is our winters tend to help kill off the mites and bugs a lot better. But here it's pretty serious. Like, they've got foot and mouth still. They've got issue with mites and bugs. So they take that pretty seriously. This was what they considered a modern feed mill, and everything was in 50-pound bags. There were no augers. Again, hundreds and hundreds of people were hand bombing these things.
I saw you in your video running back to that.
You saw that one?
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
On Twitter. So yeah, that's coming up. And this was built in 2003. So even their modern stuff is it's like 60 years in the past for us. And this one feed mill supplies 5 farms and is the largest feed mill in the country. And the one feed lot that I worked on when I went to university produces more feed than this. So it's really a different scale of agriculture there. And the other thing is that they import all of their feed. So they have to buy their feed from other countries. They can't even grow it themselves because there's no consistency or reliability in that. So this is the mill. This is the hammer mill where they've got a little recipe. They do have fish meal. They've got supplements and grains and corn from other countries. And this is where they were running to load a truck. So that's why I said, oh, I'm going to go help them out and give it a go. So that was, they were, I don't think they'd ever seen a white man work before though. So it was high fives. Yeah, there's a picture of me carrying a bag. Yeah, and these are semi trucks out here too. Like they're big trucks, but everything's hand. So they have to they make the feed. They have to ship it off to the 4 other pig farms, and then at the same time, there's trucks that are bringing in raw materials as well.
What kind of feed is that?
Sorry, we can't tell from the picture. Ken, were you running or just walking?
I was running. Yes, there is a video on Twitter. Somebody else took the video. If you check it out. And then I got a high five from the guy down at the truck there. Yeah, it was fun.
And what's in those bags?
Feed mixtures for the pigs. It's everything from fish meal, there's corn, whatever their magic formulas were. And then I mentioned they have these, 400 or 500 employees. Each farm will have, like in this case, they all live on the farm. They have schools for the children, and they actually help build the communities. So it's quite an interesting approach. I mean, it's not, we're lucky if we have 2 or 3 employees on a farm back here. Oh yeah, and they stole my hat to nail it to the wall. So I was short a hat after this day where we went to an old country club that was just down from the pig farm. And again, it would have been amazing 40 years ago, but it hadn't been touched in 40 years. But we had a nice barbecue there. So after that, we went down what they called a country road where just about rattled the bus apart. I'm surprised we made it, to be honest with you. It was such a horrible road, but we reached a dairy. This is called Red Dane Dairy. And this is kind of an innovative little approach. They're actually doing milking in the pastures. So it's a mobile milking mechanism. They've got a generator that they pull behind to run the pumps, and then they pump the milk into the tank here behind the tractor. And then I think the theory is it's, move around on the grass, and it's supposed to be more sustainable. They've had a hard time getting this to expand in adoption across Africa. There's a few guys that have tried it, but it's kind of an example of an innovative approach. But they also have they have to do supplemental feed. So they do these long strips of feed to help keep the cow. They have to give milk cows need a certain amount of energy to produce. So the grass alone isn't enough. And then they feed them to bring them in. Again, there's like 30 people just out with the cows, like they live with them 24/7. So shepherds, and the cows know what they're doing, and they're pretty well trained. And then there's that string of feed to supplement, and it's like a mix of silage and other supplements. And then they don't have mixers, they just get manpower to do it. So that'll keep you in shape, eh?
No doubt.
Just the 2 of them.
Is that stinky?
No. But then they have a regular dairy barn, and then as it turns out, this is the dairy barn that actually profits. So you always try these sort of innovative approaches, but the traditional styles tend to be more profitable. If one thing I could say is even here, every time we listen to somebody, they told us a story, and then we go to the next farm, we hear a slightly different story. So access to good information was challenging. And, you know, you talk about critical thinking, we were being trained as we were there, because it's not like they were meaning to be dishonest or anything, but everybody had a different story, and somewhere in the middle was the truth, or the truth wasn't really possible. It was just a moving target. Like I asked the one guy, like, how do you get reliable stats? He goes, we don't. We just do best guesses. So everybody is a little bit overconfident in themselves. Like every one of these successful farms, they had almost an air of arrogance, but you needed that to survive. So it was like, you know, you had to have confidence in yourself, because the risks that you were taking were tremendous. And I think that in its own was worth a little bit of reflection throughout the trip.
Can I interrupt you for
Yeah.
a second? Alexi wants to take you away in 10 minutes.
20 minutes. So there's this was just on the side of the guy's house. He said he bought it on the side of the road. So now the people there's no base care for them. So there's about 15 million people in Zimbabwe, but they all have to do something to make money, whether they have the small farm or not. Like everywhere you went, there were people trying to sell you things. So that was a bit of a problem. They say there's 95% unemployment in Zimbabwe. And this was just an example of something somebody made out of old scrap parts, and then sold to him on the side. So that was very commonplace. You can even buy toilet paper out of your car window for some reason.
Wow.
So that dairy, all of the milk goes to this facility, Kefalos, and it's a very famous brand, yogurt, ice cream, cheese. The fellow in front there, he's a Dane, Red Dane. Although he's been there, I think 5 generations as well. Starts the farm, does the value add, and honestly makes a lot of money. So the big commercial farms that they said were very successful. The smallholder farms were subsistence living. So a huge gap between the two types of farms. But this was an impressive facility. I liked the power cheese in the background there. So got a picture there. But I did get a new hat. So I have a Kefalos hat on now. Yogurt, it was a very clean looking facility, all the different processes. Maybe this was running over, but it seemed like it was okay. Lots of questions, and you know, a lot of knowledgeable staff as well, and just seemed like a top-notch facility in a chaotic country. So
That's cheese, right?
this is Parmesan cheese. Yeah,
Parmesan. Oh, what's the white fuzz on top?
probably mold. I don't know. No, it looks like it might be a salt or something.
Maybe, eh?
Yeah. Oh yeah, so they're making some ice cream cones here.
Oh, they're good. Take a turn.
I was a little disappointed though, we didn't get one.
Hmm.
And we split in 2 groups and the other group got one. Turns out they asked. But they must freeze and sell these, and they even chocolate dip them and sell them. But very popular around the country. So a really big success business. Their yogurt was very famous. In fact, it was so high tech, they didn't want us to take pictures in there. So that was interesting.
High tech for them or relative to?
No,
like-
even here.
Really? Okay.
There was high tech even for here.
Wow.
So they had investors obviously that were there with their equipment. Didn't know I had videos here, just to bag choose. So the next stop, and this was in Mire, it was a split between a tobacco farm and a game reserve. So a lot of kind of dual businesses that go on. Tobacco farming was an interesting one in that it was like the only way that they could get investment, like money, capital. So if you wanted to farm, the tobacco companies would come in and give money. Say, okay, here's, you can use this to buy inputs, labor, whatever you need. And what happens is it's kind of in the informal market, but then they would use it to buy wheat seed and everything else they needed for their farm. And it was like a tax write-off. And it's a very profitable crop, but it's also one that comes with sort of strings attached. So they were there on your farm, making sure that you did it right and inspecting. And in a sense, you got owned by the tobacco company. So some of the farmers didn't like it. This guy was big into it, and believe it or not, even the tobacco companies are looking for sustainability mechanisms. So he was trying to get rid of his coal furnace for drying the tobacco and switching to something more environmentally friendly. So they were going to grow some sort of rubber tree that was more sustainable and burn it. And then 70-degree furnace here on racks, and there are actually people in here that work on a daily basis that move the racks and dry the tobacco. So yeah, tobacco, while it's a big crop, it allows people to farm. It's also seen as environmentally destructive. So the small old farmers will also grow tobacco, and in order to dry their tobacco, they'll just go cut trees down. So there's been a lot of deforestation because of the tobacco production. And when they grow tobacco, they actually have to grow their seed in a nursery first. So this is incredibly labor intensive. Again, 400 or 500 employees. They use this to seed the tobacco in water. It's a very small seed. And then they have to trim it and cut it, water it and fertilize it. And you end up with these beautiful little strips all to the right size. And then when it goes time to actually seed, they go through and hand pick out the nice ones and then seed like a quarter section with it, or 160 acres, all by hand.
Wow.
So incredibly labor intensive, but pretty high value crop. And that's a shot of the big field that they would have seeded. Every plant put in by hand, they water it, they fertilize it. They even have like little trenches to collect the water. So it's sort of hard to even imagine that they do this. And they have pivots. All of these would have pivot irrigation on it as well. So this is unheard of because it's more of a long-term investment. But the guy's son that I just showed you is now thinking longer term because he didn't really experience the land reform, and now they've planted a macadamia nut plantation. Yeah, so that's like a 20-year investment, right? I put this picture because it's kind of like a typical meal in Zimbabwe. The smallholder farmers all grow white corn and the maize, and this looks like mashed potatoes, but it's actually made from corn, and it pretty much tastes like nothing. But that's one of the subsistence meals there. It's called sudsa, and then below is like a kale. It looks like canola. You see in everyone's garden. It's like a tall canola, and it's really high nutrient dense type meal. So those two things are kind of their subsistence. When you're able to afford meat, they usually have like a braised beef, and this is chicken and potatoes, and there's that Zambezi beer I was talking about. And then this is the game reserve side. So we actually had an armed guard here while we had lunch, and the whole point is tourism. They've got a 10,000 acre game reserve, and they have all kinds of animals and take people on tours. So this was pretty awesome. You're gonna have to tell Alexi to look out me.
Okay.
Or you can just bump it.
Yeah. This guy here, he was like a rich old Santa Claus, and a rich old, not rich, wise old Santa Claus. And he really understood things. He lost his farm and now is working as an employee on this, and kind of talked about the conservation pieces. And the rhino hunting has been a real challenge here. So they have trained a canine unit to help with poachers, because they do have rhinos on this one. $70,000 a kg still for rhino horn. The ivory thing isn't a big deal anymore, but they take incredible care of their animals. So they have patrols, armed patrols, and the canine unit that went to Europe to get trained. So we saw some giraffes with an impala in the middle there.
He lines him well.
Yeah. Little trucks, like you see in the TVs where we went around and drove. Then all of a sudden we ran into some elephants. And then we got to say hi and feed the elephants. I don't think I put my video on here. But when I went up there, they got me to turn around, the elephant ate my hat. and then gave it back to me. So I have a slimed hat. after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good synonym.
Elephant slum.
Yeah, it was slimy. It was pretty fun though. Checking out the rhinos. These are the black rhinos. There's 2 females. Oh, this is a video. Little sunset shot, but we're feeding them as well. With a protective barrier.
Are most of the animals tame?
No, this was a game reserve.
Mm.
So, yeah, I'm actually this close to this cheetah.
Hmm.
And that was weird. We just walked up to them. They didn't care about us. They had a wildebeest over by the tree that they were eating. So they brought them in to sort of manage the amount of animals they have there because they actually have too many. And then now they're finding that these cheetahs are going on a killing spree. So they're actually killing too much.
Oh, comforting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They were going to get, I think some lions or something, but they got decided. So this one's neat because you see the cows in the background. They have cattle mixed in with the wildlife. They did kill a calf or 2, but the cows actually learned how to protect themselves pretty well. So they don't go after the cows anymore. And the cows help in tick management because they dip the cows in like an insecticide that attracts the ticks. And then it ends up helping save the wildlife because you can't dip a rhino
Or cheetah.
or a cheetah. But these cheetahs, they have an armed guard on them 24/7. They actually have a guy with a machine gun that follows these guys around on foot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because they're so high risk of poaching.
Yeah, I don't know. They're just caring for them, I guess. There's a couple of them. This is Mike and Amy. We had a Dick of the Day hat, and that was a transfer of the hat there. So I was happy to give it to her. Just to show the camaraderie that we had. We've actually already booked our next trip. So every 2 years we're going to get together. So we're going to the Northern Territory, Australia in 2024. So this was a big farm that we met. It was a feedlot. It was a grain farm. And again, it was like responsible for 70% of the production in the entire country. This was on Mugabe's cousin's land. So they had to pay rent to her. She's lives in the US, but comes up and takes money every once in a while. But just listening to him talk, and he contracted out wheat. They don't really know what they're doing, but they're just doing it. They're doing the best that they can. They don't really have much for research. They play around with different approaches, and they're doing pretty well in all honesty. Like the growing conditions there are great. They can grow year round. They do have access to irrigation and pivots. But on the long and the short of it is that I think they spend all of their energy trying to survive the chaos, that they don't really focus too much on the agronomy end.
It's like less academic rigor.
Yeah, if none. Yeah. So these guys are putting line down. They're doing a little bit of effort. They're trying to help with acidic soils. It's all by hand. At least they're wearing masks up there, right? So this was the biggest tractor we saw. Like it was a big facility. But then they took us to an abattoir, which was less than appealing. So this was they do kill all of the animals, and then they go to a butcher. But you can see like the walls are coming apart. Like this wouldn't pass CFIA inspections by any means, but it was left idle. It was just sitting there for 10-20 years. And then they said they just sort of got it up and running again. So that happens. Sometimes you'll see pretty miserable looking facilities, and then in contrast, like high-tech, amazing facilities. It's like one of the only combines we saw out there, but it did have a nice wheat crop. They only grow wheat under irrigation. They still have to import. In fact, they import from Canada and a few other countries.
I was going to ask about that. I saw your tweet that you said it was like a bit of a surprise, and pardon my ignorance, but why is that a surprise compared to like a North American sort of?
Why would they be importing from Canada?
No, the irrigation aspect.
My tweet was about the surprise that the only irrigation I saw was pivots and drip, which is high-end stuff.
Oh, okay.
And why wouldn't they have low tech, like flood and hammer? And I think one of the big reasons is only the high-end commercial farms are really doing a lot of irrigating.
Okay.
And then the big companies come in because they can make money doing it. Whereas they have no access to capital, so even to go buy hand move, like they're not gonna make money on it. It was just such a chasm between high end and low end, and there was no in between. Like even here, we have still wheel moves in some places. It's a low end technology, but it's still a low cost way of getting into irrigating. Whereas here they had pivots and drip irrigation only. So the potato crops, potatoes were very profitable because they were in the informal market. They would literally take a semi full of potatoes and then sell to people on the streets by the bag. So no tax, lots of high revenue. In fact, they were investing in a potato storage facility so that they could meet the market throughout the year. For these guys, all the farms, like there's no marketing. It's just, how can I produce more? When I talk to the pig guys, it's like, yeah, how do we grow the internal market? They say, well, we just build another farm and they sell it. So they're not at a point where they need to do any market research. They just have to figure out how to produce more.
Is that because there's not competition because you've got one?
I
guy
don't think
doing-
there is enough competition.
Gotcha.
No, and I think that could be an issue because, and I'm actually asked that at one of these events too, is like, it really seems like there's not enough competition because it keeps you honest. Even the irrigation companies, like I saw some of the things that they were selling over there for absolutely obscene prices compared to what we would get. And that's partly what prompted the question. Then on the flip side, well, what if the business wants to go into this environment and try and succeed? So yeah, they're more like mini cartel type operations, but at the same time they're feeding the country.
Fair.
So it's really, really bizarre. The other thing here is that they're growing potatoes on potatoes on potatoes, all on fresh virgin land, and they're going to get into trouble. If you do that, then the disease and insects are going to be a big problem. But like I said, it's almost like agriculture just started 2 years ago on the grand scale.
Ken, did you get a chance to ask about wheat prices and what they're selling bushel for and what something like Canadian wheat landed costs there?
Yeah, well, the prices were all global prices, so they have to trade on a global market. So the prices were pretty comparable. Sometimes a little bit higher because of the transportation costs, but a lot of times their lower cost feeds were coming from other higher producing African countries. And I think the difference just comes down to transportation costs. The blueberry guys were in trouble. Like I said, they were shipping out of South Africa and there happened to be a strike on the ships right now. So now their product's all stuck. So I think they have some big bottlenecks. Zimbabwe is landlocked as well, and they're not producing enough to really feed themselves. So it's, the prices were very, very comparable. So now we're onto a blueberry farm. These were just for trimming the blueberries, but they had about a $5 to $7 million drip irrigation system here, like high-tech Netafim stuff. I actually have similar. This is better than the stuff I have on my own farm, actually. But they have raised beds. They have an investor. They have a drip tech company. 2 sons kind of have an investor, and they just went all out. So they went high-end irrigation systems. They put their fertilizer through. They weigh individual pots to track the watering, and then they have 500 employees that pick it all. And this is just a spot where they have their lunch and grab some shade, but I think they have about 40 or 50 hectares of blueberries, and that's how they look. They're just in raised beds in pots. Each one has drip irrigation going to it, and the funny thing is they even make their own dams. Like there's no irrigation districts. It's just, let's hire a company, build a dam, and use the water for irrigation. So they actually have a lot of irrigation potential, believe it or not, even though it's a relatively hot and dry country. And they have sorting and then a big cooling refrigeration. And now I'm on to the next farm, which is an old flower rose turned marijuana off. And this was like probably one of the only farms in Zimbabwe, but it is legalized. And he says his claim to fame is that they have the lowest cost production. Again, cheap labor, lots of sunlight. This is not a profitable operation, but it's a younger generation farmer who's got investments likely from his father and others. And in a short order, they're building a pretty big operation. So he's come to Colorado, went to university, studied it, and is now trying to build a business in the backyard here.
That's medical,
Yeah, medical marijuana and going for the CBD stuff as well.
and that's the formal market.
Yeah, I think it would be a formal market because they had to get registered from the government. So
Gotcha.
government will try to take a cut on that. It looks fancy, but it's all sort of Jimmy rig grow ops, just plastic bags. But here we are in a room full of buds. And surprisingly, we're okay to take pictures here, but
Was it stinky?
yeah, no, it wasn't too bad. This is the guy here. He even called himself a stoner, and it was like we were at like Fidel Castro's place. It was just a bizarre experience. So these were all for CBD that he's trying to at least generate a little bit of revenue to keep things rolling. But pretty nice setup. Like he's got drip irrigation, lots of cheap labor to take really good care of the plants, and lighting. And again, all of the employees were on farm, so this is their little community and soccer field without too much grass. But they all seemed happy. And now we're on to the dad's facility, and his main business is specialty flower. So this is actually an echinacea and thistle. So he figured out how to profit from thistle, which caught my attention. Sunshine Farms, that's the farmer. He has like greenhouses, and he says they can't compete on the main flowers like with like Holland would produce, but he thinks that there's lots of opportunity for niche crops. So niche flowers, again, goes up to Holland. And lots of drip tape and quasi type greenhouses, but still amazing amount of effort that would go into this. It's all manual labor. So we can't compete on the manual labor side of things with these guys if they ever got rolling. But the main thing again on this farm is tobacco. So here's another tobacco field under a pivot, and that helps sort of bring in the financing to support the farm. But this guy, he's kind of like the stamps, like he wants to grow some trees because of the deforestation. So he hates growing tobacco, but he has to. So he's trying to do something to mitigate some of the issues around it. We went on a good old wagon ride. It's just shot like somebody driving on the back of a vehicle. That was pretty commonplace. Sorry if this is dragging on. We saw so much. So now we're at an irrigation company, and these are the guys that plan the dams, set up pivots. So Valley and Zimbabwe are companies that we know here in Southern Alberta. They're US based companies. They're in Zimbabwe, they're selling pivots, and I guess they see growth opportunity. The entire country actually has a tremendous amount of opportunity. They could be producing hundreds of times more than they are just on the land and water that they have. But with he's showing us a bunch of pivots, but then when land reform came, this is what happened. So we've had all these old pivots here, and they give the land away. So now it's divided up into little pieces. So they're not even using the irrigation that was there. They just took over the land. So it's pretty tough. And the funny thing is while some of these farms are starting up, a lot of them are still losing farms. So I talked to a guy that lost his farm 12 months ago. And then he told me that he knows of a guy that lost his farm 3 months ago. So you have farms starting and then farms losing all at the same time. So it's just chaotic. Yeah, they had a big irrigation company here. All, very similar technology to what we're using
That
here.
was pretty modern.
Yeah, it is. Everything's modern. Sometimes you'd see things that were super modern, and then other things it was like you're in a time warp, like guys loading a truck by hand, right? We met with the UK ambassador to Zimbabwe and just had a chat. I mean, they obviously have ties to the country, and they're trying to encourage trade, and they kind of left the country without any real preparation. So I don't think the country was really set up to take care of itself when they kind of upped and left there. So there's sort of weird relationship with the UK. But I asked about, how we could, I felt like we could do a lot, even if it was just to simply help the Nuffield program there, like, so she suggested talking to the Canadian ambassador, but I guess we're not really doing much with Zimbabwe right now. Although I just met with MP Rachel Harder, who's in Sri Lanka right now.
Oh,
So I thought that was really interesting. Had a good chat. We heard from a government guy and he was just a pure salesman. He was just selling Zim as the highest quality food. This was just a slide of the horticulture that they are exporting. So flowers and peas, blueberries, citrus, and nuts. So nuts and citrus make up a lot of it. And, comparing what their current exports are, which are really quite minuscule in all honesty, 17 million in nuts, and that's like, 30% of their exports. So they're not really a big exporting country at all, but they're looking to develop that because it's pretty high value avocados. This was just a beautiful view at a silver shop. And mining is a big industry in Zimbabwe. So this guy recognizes a lot of gold mines, and silver is a byproduct of the gold mines. And so he just started making jewelry. But everywhere we go, they make jewelry and they've got cheap labor that are doing it for them. So they make earrings and animals and all kinds of stuff. So and this was like about a half a mile from Mugabe's palace, which we drove by, and he's not alive anymore, but it was probably like a 160 acre in the middle of the city type thing. Cheetahs out of silver and all kinds of things. I just took a picture of this because I remember we talked about, like, I haven't never seen prepaid electricity before, but that's just the difference there. Like it's definitely not your first world. This is tough to see, but wherever we drove, this is actually corn, old corn that's been harvested. So between the road and the railroad, people were farming, and that was their sort of subsistence living. And then often they would burn it just to clear the residues so they could farm again. So you can see the corn stalks and the shacks behind there. So there's been a lot of, I guess, urbanization in a sense, like they're all around the city, but they're kind of like on the outskirts and just trying to eke out an existence, and really just burning. And then there's one person hoeing up there. And these are all, I think, attempts at being scarecrows just to protect their garden. And this is a tire shop, believe it or not. They would fix car tires right here, and I thought it was pretty funny too because it says "Wise Donkey Bar." And this is public transportation. There's probably about 35 people in that van.
oh,
Is
Yeah.
English their main language?
Everybody speaks English, but the native language, I think, is Shawnan, something like that. There's people everywhere. Right? Wherever we went, like even in the middle of nowhere, there's somebody there. This is more out in the country, so you kind of got the grass huts, which are kind of neat looking. And again, you can see the burning in the background. My nose is getting stuffed up even just looking at these pictures. But then I found one spot that had hand moved. So this was another farm he had lost his farm but managed to keep his house and a little bit of land. And now about 25 or 30 years ago, they built a huge reservoir. So irrigation is his main thing. So he's trying to do low input farming with basically just irrigation and grazing management. And he doesn't want to do tobacco. He doesn't like that game. So he's sort of set in his ways, and he's trying to do all the sort of mob grazing and moving them 4 times a day. This is him, Mark Hook. And we stayed there the night and toured everything. And then I actually went with his son, who is another generation who wants to farm. And guess what he's farming? But tobacco, actually not asparagus. This just looked like a giant asparagus to me, so I thought it was pretty cool.
And what is it?
I don't know. It grows out of this.
Okay.
It was like 8 foot tall asparagus. Yeah. So this is so you can see the nice green lush grass, and again they've got shepherds that move them in around and protect from predators.
The animals look healthy.
They are, yeah,
Mhm.
really good. You can see there's a pivot out here that used to be his farm, and I think they took it away. Some dude sleeping by the cows there. So the son of the guy, he's growing tobacco. This is the only way he can get going. But he doesn't want to grow tobacco. He's using it as a means to an end. He's just showing me how you pull the plants out. The next day they were going to go plant 10 hectares. The problem is that none of the staff had ever done it before. So I don't know, trying to imagine herding 400 people into a job, that would be kind of tricky. But he's an innovative guy, and this is actually his attempt at diversifying. So he's growing lemon trees. Yeah. But again, he's using tobacco to fund it all. Just a cool shot of the tobacco and a big rock in the background. We had one tobacco farmer with us. She was from North Carolina, so she was pretty excited to see and learn about what they were doing. And this is a shot of their reservoir that they built. So they got this beautiful lake. It's a
It's
pivot
used for
there.
irrigation, that way?
Yeah. Yeah, it's their own reservoir. They could probably do tourism out here too, but they don't. See, now I bought myself another.
Oh, yeah.
Got rid of that stupid elephant one.
Jersey cows.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, he talked a lot about the breeds of cattle. I'm actually glad to mention that, because one of the things he's been trying to do is through genetics, adapt the cattle to his system. So he wants them to be able to feed for longer. So he's breeding cows with bigger stomachs.
Oh,
It's kind of
really?
weird. Yeah, and then he goes around and finds genetics from different countries and tries to breed animals that are suited to his system. Now we just watched the sunset next to his reservoir here. It looks like a scene out of the Lion King.
Mhm. It does.
Yeah, lots of
does too.
sunsets. This was the first grainer that I saw, and I don't know if you noticed, but it's on one of those bills.
Oh,
Yes.
really?
So this is a government grain system. There was only a few of these that I saw throughout the whole country.
It looks pretty
I
automated.
think it's called the Grain Marketing Board. Yeah. Found it?
I think so.
Looks
No,
like
it looks exactly like that.
It's on the $10 bill.
No, keep looking,
No?
it's not that one.
Okay.
Oh,
So now we're at the crocodile farm, and they're at this another huge reservoir called Lake Kariba. And this is just floodplains with animals, so we're just sitting in the grass. That's the one.
let's see.
$5 billion.
It's on the $5 billion bill.
That's an awesome shot.
So that's the logo for Pandiga. So these guys have made so much money, and it was a top-notch facility that they bought a gold mine. So now these guys are gold mine crocodile farmers. And I don't have any pictures, but it was really impressive. They only grow them to about 3 years old, and then the skins go.
Is that a crocodile swamp?
No, this is actually a fish farm.
Oh.
What is that apparatus in the front?
That's an aerator.
Oh,
That's
Oh.
it. So it only runs at night. Funny enough,
Oh.
it looks like green swampy water, but apparently it's good for the fish. So they grow tilapia. The crocodile farm, they didn't allow pictures. It's not probably like a PETA type thing. They didn't want out there, but you know, it is basically a crocodile feedlot. They produce 53,000 crocodiles a year.
And they're tame or not tame?
No, they're not tame.
So
So
for
they
like
can't-
luxury goods.
It's like purses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's all
Interesting.
traveling people. So it's a really high end market. Well, rich people travel to France
Yeah.
and they buy a purse. So I think I heard like some of these purses are like $500,000.
Oh, yeah, like a
So
burger.
it's super high end.
so what about all the meat?
The meat, they don't really sell much because it's
Oh.
got E. coli in it.
Oh,
And they're actually pretty small. Like they're not very big animals when they.
it's big enough to make a purse.
Yeah, it's all about the belly and it's all about perfection. So they clip the nails, they clip the teeth. They want to make it low stress. They've even got music playing in some of the pens. Like
Mm.
it's pretty interesting. One of the challenges they have is environmental stuff, like for the water that comes in and out. So they have some challenges there that they're working on, but like it's pretty high cost as well. So interesting business regardless. sorry if this is being too long here. Fish farm, they start on land. This is sort of where the hatchery is. They grow a little bit bigger and then they pump them out and take them to Lake Kariba. So ironically, we're on boats in crocodile infested waters and our boat broke.
Hmm.
So we left one group stranded and they got rescued and we went to this fish farm in the middle of a lake. And they just sit here, feed them, and then they also package them and freeze them, and it's like the main fish product in Zimbabwe. So it's a big brand, but it's another example. They own the entire value chain. Very little competition. And here we are rescuing the one guy in the boat.
Mhm.
We're at the top of the dam. This is Lake Kariba. It's like 235 kilometers long and very deep. And it's really not being used to its full potential. So that's why I said like the potential that they have to expand their agriculture and irrigation is tremendous. They just don't have the infrastructure and the political will to do it.
Hmm.
There's the little, it's just a little dam too. It's not very big.
And why is
They
it
have-
dammed? Why are they damming that water?
To have water.
Oh,
So is that the
The Zambezi?
Zambezi
Yeah.
that they've done?
I think they did it for the friggin' turbines, to be honest with you. But they're not using the water as much as they could be.
So hydroelectric.
Yeah, there's hydroelectric there.
who
And
is
I
there?
think the Chinese actually own it. So there's a Chinese influence there too, where
Hmm.
they're profiting. Now we're on to a banana. I'm almost there, and paprika farm. So this is sun-dried paprika.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Didn't seem overly sanitary. They're just
Yeah, I see that.
walking around in it, sweeping it up.
I like paprika.
I know. This is banana storage. Sunspun bananas. I thought I
So they
recognized.
export the bananas or
Yes,
just keep it in their country?
I think both. I didn't get that question, to be honest with you. So this was hot here. This was 40 degrees. And they just dry them out on these beds here.
Did you bring paprika home?
Did not.
Oh,
You could have just filled your pockets there.
Yeah. The bananas were neat. These were banana flowers at the end.
look at the
Nurseries.
mist. That's irrigation, that mist? Or
Yeah,
is it?
yeah.
Okay.
And here we are getting towards the end of the trip. We were gonna go like on a reserve in the wild along the Zambezi, and once again a boat breaks. Crocodile infested waters. In fact,
Did you actually see the
he shouldn't have
crocodiles?
his foot hanging over there. Like they were definitely telling us not to do that.
Did you see the crocodiles in the water?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I was fishing on the bank and they were yelling at me that there was a huge croc coming towards me, and I saw the two eyes coming towards me. Yeah. He never jumped over and got me. Anyways, we spent, that was pretty much the end of the ag trip. We spent the last 2 days hanging out in these tents on the Zambezi, just enjoying Africa, watching the sunsets. It's like an episode out of Survivor here. Candlelit dinners outside, outdoor showers and bathrooms, frogs all over the place. Elephants would walk right through our camp, and lions and all kinds of things went through our camp. I didn't see them. And we had armed guards to escort us back to the tents at night. So you would be like flashlight and you see two eyeballs. A little creepy. This little fire pit, and you can see the elephants out in the background here, kind of in the floodplain. So you just sit there and watch them.
so is this like a little tourist attraction part of it?
Yeah, this was just sort of have fun to say goodbye. This was hot, so hot. It only got down to 29 at night. It was pretty dreadful. Lots of birds. We tried fishing on this river. They have a tiger fish that has like jagged, sharp teeth. We never did catch. We caught one little one, but not much. But everywhere we went, there's elephants and
That's a
hippos.
great picture.
Yeah. They're pretty neat. There's some hippos.
Mhm.
They make a hilarious sound all night too. So we were fishing on the bank. This is where that one was swimming towards me.
That's a good job.
Do a lot of people
Thanks.
get eaten by crocodiles?
Yeah, like 3-4 a month.
Really?
That's right, you said that.
Yeah.
That's,
Are you on a boat here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are funny looking. Now, I know it seems weird that we're in the river, but apparently on these sandbars, it's safe. So we're told.
How do you know, hey?
Yeah, but right along where the boat is, where it's deep, they wanted us to stay away from the deep side. So they
Oh.
like to hide and then jump up, but because we're in the shallows, you can usually see them coming and get out of the way. So yeah, this was the last night we were there. We just sat in the water and watched the sunset. You
Oh.
can see there's elephants, Cape buffalo in the background here too. Somebody was telling me to take pictures here, so I did. It's just a nice way. Because I didn't see lions, I stopped on the way. And these guys were in a cage kind of thing.
Oh.
But
Why
all
were
of a
they
sudden,
caged?
it's just like a,
Is this a breeding thing? Oh, because it's a male and female. Is it a breeding?
no,
part?
they're not breeding.
Oh, okay.
They're healthy though. But
do
while we're
look
standing there,
healthy.
all of a sudden the female jumped up and ran towards us. And I'm like, what the hell's going on?
Oh.
And then hid behind a pole and was trying to hunt. And then a couple seconds later, a dude in a wheelbarrow walked up. So he had some old food.
So
And
did the
Wheelbarrow.
lioness pounce at you guys?
kind of, no, but she was looking at the guy with the wheelbarrow. She could smell him coming. Because the lady that we were with said, yeah, they're hungry. They need to be fed tomorrow. So.
Do they only get fed every other day or something?
Once a week.
Oh my goodness, you're kidding.
Keep them on the
So
edge.
she's rubbing up against this electric fence. And obviously it wasn't working. Like the do not cross this fence. Stopped at a machinery equipment, just to see what they had and talk to the guys. And this is my last picture. This is the craziness of Zimbabwe.
Like modern vehicles even, hey?
Some of them, yeah.
But overloaded.
Yeah. So that's my trip.
Amazing.
It was
Amazing.
it was pretty fantastic. I mean, on top of everything we saw, I think the human interest piece was just amazing. And then the camaraderie that we had with all the people that were part of it, like it was hard to fathom.
Mm.
And then, you know, just to put perspective into our own lives too, and what we have and what they still manage to fight through and can find success too. So
Can I ask a question?
absolutely.
It's maybe more of a philosophical question, but like you talk about sort of the opportunity for growth and expansion.
Mhm.
Where do you see the opportunity for sort of like Western agricultural senses to learn from sort of that way of life? I know you talk about like analog and
Well, I think the entrepreneurial spirit that they have is definitely one that I grabbed onto, right? Like from our perspective, you can't own land, you can't get a bank loan, but yet these guys still go find a way to make it happen. So it's kind of like a perseverance thing. And you know, I think that's what I take away from it is just that, you know, we get caught up in the stupidest little squabbles here. And these guys have complete chaos and still find a way to be successful. So I think if anything, it reinvigorates passion. You know, we're going through little squabbles right now regarding our government policies. And I think, you know, like I talk to these guys and they're like, yeah, government will never change. But whatever, we're going to figure out a way to make it work anyways. We're still in that realm where we can influence our government. And, you know, you talk about what's happening in Holland and Sri Lanka. Like, I think we need to wake up and get a little more involved in ag policy, fight for a system that does work rather than whine and complain about stupid little things. So, yeah, I think that's just it. It's like, it's that farming and entrepreneurial spirit. Like they can go out there, yeah, they're going to make a profit, but at the same time, they are feeding their country. We have an opportunity, one of the only countries in the world, to actually export food.
feed the
So,
world.
yeah, exactly. Feed the world.
Thank you.
Long-winded answer, eh?
No, thank you. That was
No
great.
problem.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ken. I have a couple of questions for you. When you didn't mention soil in this, and I don't know if people there talked about it much, but is soil health or productivity a a focus at all, or do they
Yeah.
just?
No, I just neglected to talk about it because there was so much that went on in the experience. I think the soil health piece is one of focus. They do not actually have any biotech crops, so they're sort of following suit with the European approach. And there is an overall sort of mentality towards this regenerative ag, and big chemical companies are bad. So a lot of biostimulant, bio this, bio that. So there's a lot of focus on that. But I'm not sure it's always for the right reasons. And I don't think there's enough knowledge to really deal with it appropriately. So that I don't think they have a big science continuum there. And they're being sort of attracted by what they see on social media and what they see as an ideology. And I think they could, like they are interested in zero tillage, but they don't know how to do it. So they've looked at Brazil as a country, but they haven't spent a lot of time, trying to figure out how they can make zero till work. And then, but at the same time, they're like, oh, they want to do zero till without Roundup. So there's a big disconnect in their knowledge base, but there is definitely an interest in sort of this biological approach to farming. But it's not really followed through in practice.
The farm that's growing potatoes on potatoes on potatoes,
Yeah,
they know what's going to happen, don't they?
I think so. I think I think the bottom driver right now is they don't have enough land, and they're just getting the business rolling. So if they can get away with it, they will. And I think it's just the pressures on them to produce is higher than the pressure to produce right.
So, and finally, you mentioned the entrepreneurship, and that really struck me too. I mean, these folks are on the edge, and yet full bore for these big operations.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what your takeaways are for farming smarter. I mean, obviously, you'll be taking out a help wanted ad, hiring 400 workers for farming smarter, because that's how you do it, right? Do you think it might influence your thinking in terms of doing more crazy things, looking at niche crops, or anything that might impact what you do at Lethbridge?
I think the biggest thing is just giving me confidence in what we're doing. I think that's been the message all around, because they love the idea of what we're doing here. They'd like to actually start an organization. We're already in conversations with a few people there that would like to build a grassroots group that can add some value to the science. For me, what I would bring back here is kind of like I talked with you about fighting for support mechanisms for us to be successful, for our own ag policy to be supportive of our environment, and not pushing us in the wrong direction when we know that. We see like I said, I am an environmentalist, but our ag policies are so climate change focused that they're not even ag focused. And I think we need to be strong leaders. Those guys, their fortitude that they have, like I said, they had an air of arrogance, like big fish in a little pond. Well, we got to be big fish in a little pond here too, even if it's a big pond. So I think if anything, I'm gonna fight harder for what I think is right for our ag industry. And I used to hate ag policy, but I can see the importance of it.
Hey, thank you very much for this presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Good, thanks, Glenn. Glad you could make it. So have a good day then.
Thank you very much. You too. Bye-bye.
See ya. Do I have to stop recording this?
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for coming.